If you pour concrete for a living, I have a whole new level of respect for you and the work you do, because this was really freaking hard. We only poured about a 10 by 20 foot slab. It's for a shed. I'll talk you through the whole time lapse here in a minute. But it was so hard. We did save a ton of money, which we're happy about. It's my son and my daughter's boyfriend. They helped out. They actually did all of the heavy lifting.
Muscles look big. They look huge, man. You look jacked.
All I really did was frame it out and then help float it. They literally did all of the hard work, but I was still drained. I don't know how many bags of concrete we used. I lost track, but stay tuned, because I'll take you through the whole process, and it's certainly something anyone can do. It just takes a little bit of time and muscle, and I mean, I don't even know how much money we saved doing it ourselves, but it was well worth it. So stay tuned. Hey everyone, welcome to another video. In this one, we are pouring a slab over at my son's house for a shed. He's had the shed for a couple years, and he originally put it together on the back patio. And since then, he's gotten engaged, which is really great. We're really excited about that. And his fiance said, "Hey, what is this shed doing on the patio? Shouldn't we have furniture here?" And evidently, there is nothing more motivating to him than his fiance wanting something done. So wisely, he promptly got us over there to pour this slab and get that shed off of the back patio so that they could put some furniture back there. So anyway, I'll talk you through how we formed this out, and more importantly, I will talk you through some things that we would do differently. If you're going to do this project, maybe you could learn from my mistakes. Anyway, like I said, we just used 2x4s, and I put a few supports around the two seams of the longer legs of the 2x4, and then just made sure it was square in the traditional way by measuring across the corners. And the first thing that I would do differently is I would either dig out that back corner more. There was a bunch of roots and rocks back there, and that's why we didn't put the effort into digging it out. We figured we would just make it level and then just use extra concrete. Well, if you look in the front of the form, that's about 3 inches of just air underneath that form. And that is the first thing that I would do differently. I think I would try to dig out the back just a little bit so that the boards could sit lower in the back right-hand corner. And even if that just got me about an inch lower on the whole form, that would have reduced that an inch of that almost 3 inches of space in the front. The second thing I would do differently is I would pour dirt on the inside of the form so that concrete didn't spill out. You'll see here in a minute I did something different, but in the future I would just pour dirt there to help prevent the concrete from spilling out under the form. I wouldn't do anything different about the rebar. All we were doing is just trying to keep it from majorly separating. We're not worried about little cracks, and we're not even worried about the actual surface of the concrete for 2 reasons. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But what I was mentioning before is we use these door skins to screw into the form to block the concrete from flowing out underneath the form. And I'm sure anybody that's watching this is immediately thinking, well, that's stupid, because now you're going to have this weird shelf of concrete. Well, that did not register in our minds. At the very least, what I should have done is taken the door skin and put it on the inside of the form so that it's pressed up against the grass, and then take a Sawzall and just cut it even with the top of the form to keep that level top, keep the top of the form level. Well, live and learn. This was a real pain in the butt to get apart at the end, and we ended up with that weird shelf that we had to kind of resod and put some dirt up around to cover. But in the end, it worked out. It's just these are some things that I would do differently. We hammered in those wooden spikes about every 2 to 3 feet. That turned out to be plenty. The form really held up. And those areas on the side where we put 2 2x4s together, the one on the left came out fine. The one on the right started to bow out slightly. So if I did it again, I would put more support on those longer runs on the side, because even though they're 2x4s, they will bow out with the weight of the concrete. So live and learn. Anyway, renting this mixer machine was absolutely essential. There's no way we could have pulled this off without that. And then we took a 2x4 that was longer than the form and just used the rails of the form to vibrate the 2x4 down to work the concrete out level. And then we also used that, we kind of shook it back and forth to vibrate the mud up to kind of cover the aggregate. And that worked great. Everything about the leveling process worked really well. As I mentioned, if you're going to use this for anything else, we're using it for the shed, and the shed's going to cover most of it. So we weren't really cosmetically worried about the way the concrete finish looked. If you're going to use this for a hot tub pad or a patio pad, if anybody uses this in the future for anything else, they're probably going to brick it or put stone down or do something to make it look nicer. So that is reason number 2 that we weren't really worried about what it looked like. We just didn't want it to sink or crack or separate it. We wanted some support in there. So we just kept chugging along, and we actually got the mix fairly consistent. Probably could have been a little bit drier of a mix overall, but it did float out really nicely. And only at the very end did we get the mix too wet, which you'll see that coming up here. But because that form wasn't had so much space in the front, we totally ran out of concrete. The formula I put in was for 3.5 inches by the length and the width, and I did not account for all that extra concrete to fill up that gap because we didn't level the yard. That worked out to be about 40 bags, if I remember correctly, and that stopped everything, right? Had to run back to Home Depot, get 40 more bags of concrete, and in the meantime, I went ahead and tried to finish up the back part of the slab that was done. What I'm doing here is rounding over the edges. It's just a little tool with a round over on it, metal tool, and you just slide it around the edge and you get a nice curve like a sidewalk. Here I'm putting these uprights to support a tarp so that when we're totally done, we can put a tarp over the whole thing. This is Florida and it does rain. You can get like 15 minutes of rain on a beautiful day, so we didn't want it to get rained on. So that's what that is for, the beginning there. And anyway, here they are back, and we're mixing up this concrete, and this is the part of the concrete that was really too wet. It's kind of unfortunate, but it worked out. You can't see any difference in the curing or anything. It just caused a little extra work at the end here. Here we are kind of nitpicking this, trying to get it as level as possible and push as much water off that edge as we can. Put the other uprights for the tarp. And then here's my first try at trying to put the round over, and it's just too wet. What happens is the round over just disappears. It rolls back into the form. So thought it was dry enough, and in a second here, after I broom sweep as much of it as I can, we notice the dog running around, and we get this harebrained idea to put the dog's footprints in the slab. So my son held her, that's Lily, and shoved her feet in there and wrote her name with a stick. It was a great idea, probably be cute, but we ended up floating it out because like I said, this whole area was just too wet and it just mudded together. You couldn't even read it. You couldn't tell it was dog prints, but it was a fun idea. Here's laying some paper towels down to try to soak up some of that water. That actually worked really well. I was a little surprised. And then we put the tarp in place to protect it from the rain over the next week or so that we left it to cure. Then we pulled the form off, and it came out really nice. Here's what it looks like after it's set up for a week. We didn't take the form off. We were just kind of lazy, actually. And we do want to get the shed, which is right there. That shed is going to end up over here. We wanted to get the shed up on it and not risk messing up the edges here. I don't think there's any risk of that, but what we'll probably do is try to slide that shed up on there and then pull the form off. So this does bow a little bit. On this side, it bows in slightly right in the middle, and on this side, it bows out right there. It has a little belly in it, but whatever, that's what bushes are for. Plant some bushes on either side of it. You'll never see that side, of course, but you plant some bushes on this side if you wanted to, and you'll never notice it. But anyway, came out pretty darn nice, I think. It's the first time I've seen it. It is pretty darn solid. That, of course, right there is the only part you're gonna see. So this little hump isn't too bad at all. It actually looks like it shrunk down a little bit with curing. Anyway, yeah, so I mean, there really isn't a hump at all. So it should come out pretty good.